Hi everyone, and welcome to Spaulding Ridge's demo walkthrough of demand planning and Anaplan. My name is Kyle Risch. I'm an associate partner here at Spaulding Ridge, now specifically leading our supply chain practice. So before we jump into the demo today, there's a couple things that I did want to review. Number one is what are some of the pain points that our customers are experiencing when it comes to demand plan? So what are some of the things that you should be looking out for when we're thinking of prospective clients, and what are those issues that we're trying to solve? Secondly, I want to go through what are some of the expected outcomes with a model like this? What are some of the ROIs that we can anticipate to really help our customers improve their supply chain planning process? And then last, we'll go through an agenda of the few topics that I'll be running through on the demand planning demo today. So let's jump in. So in terms of pain points within demand planning, I think it really starts with having an inaccurate or outdated forecast that these companies are using. So when you think of a supply chain, it really begins with your demand planning and your forecasting. So if you have an inaccurate forecast, you have to think of the downstream effects that come from that. Your supply plans are out of whack, your inventory's not in the right place, you could have too much or too little. It's really a pretty dramatic effect if you have an inaccurate forecast. Secondly, it's a lack of collaboration with other departments. So what we're trying to achieve within Anaplan is what we call a consensus demand planning process, where we want to make sure that we're getting inputs from our sales team, we're getting inputs from marketing or from finance, to be able to collaborate with all those different teams. What a lot of companies struggle with is supply chain could be on one system, finance is on another system or another set of spreadsheets. There's just a really large lack of collaboration within the different departments. Third, only being able to plan at one level. And what I mean with that is one of the benefits within Anaplan is really being able to plan through different dimensions. So what happens with a lot of customers and a lot of clients is they're able to maybe to forecast it at a SKU level, just as at a single location, but they can't roll up and see, okay, I want to look at it as at a product family level. I want to look at my forecasts instead of at a location level. I want to look at it regionally, or nationally. They don't have the ability to quickly and be able to see those different levels. And then lastly here, the lack of visibility into product performance. So really understanding, what are those products that are really helping drive our business forward and the ones that we should be focusing our time and energy on. Now, when we think of ROIs for demand planning within Anaplan, I think first and foremost, we mentioned, an increase in forecast accuracy. It's in terms of the benefits that they're going to see. I think, building out kind of a statistical type of forecasting methodology, which we'll go through today, is really going to be pretty advanced from, what some of the customers that we've been talking to. Future visibility into business needs. I think this is going to really help our clients and our customers have a more proactive approach when it comes to their planning, and instead of really being reactive, they can now see farther into the future and start planning for those different spikes that could be coming down the line. Understanding downstream effect on forecast changes. So kind of what I mentioned before is supply chain is very much almost like a domino effect. If your demand plan is off, there's going to be a downstream effect on those on that change. So having the ability to quickly adjust that forecast and see, okay, how is this going to affect the rest of my supply chain? And then again, visibility into past and future product trends, so we can see, what products are performing well, and maybe some areas of focus where we have some products that aren't performing quite as well. So in terms of an agenda, really kind of broken into three parts here. So first, I'll take you through kind of the statistical forecasting methodology built out here. What is the process of really building a strong statistical baseline, and how do we achieve that within Anaplan? We'll be looking at, forecast analysis, how, what we call a best fit methodology. I'll walk you through that. Outlier management. So, how are we flagging outliers and SKUs that maybe aren't quite performing as well when it comes to a forecast. And then I'll talk through what's called managing by exception. We want to make sure we're leveraging Anaplan as much as possible. And the folks that are using this, kind of the end users, are really only managing their demand plan through an exception basis. We'll go through product lifecycle planning, so new product forecasting, end of life management, product segmentation. So how do we kind of group, our different SKUs here and understanding where we need to spend our time and effort. And then the last piece will be demand collaboration. So what I talked about before, really building that strong consensus demand planning process. How are we tracking to see how our forecasts are doing? And then finally, how are we tracking against other groups and making sure that we're coming up with that strongest consensus forecast possible. Okay, so with that, I am going to go ahead and shift over here to the actual demo here. Okay, so when we see this landing page here, like I mentioned, there's a few things I want to go through with you guys today. So it's really broken into a few different pieces. So the statistical baseline, our product lifecycle management here, and then finally, our demand collaboration and analytics. I'll take you through a few of these dashboards here, and then kind of finish up with some typical questions that we see asked as we go through this. So first and foremost, let's jump into here, this forecast algorithm analysis. So I'm going to go ahead and drop down to the SKU here. So what we're looking at is the 26 different built-in statistical forecasting algorithms within Anaplan. And so what we're able to do is when we come into our clients and we start building this, what we have the ability to do is take their historicals and run it through what we call a best fit method selection. And so what that means is of all these different statistical forecasting algorithms here, we want to be able to pick that one method based on how the SKU performs, kind of week over week or month over month, whatever those time settings are. Pick that forecasting algorithm that gives us the lowest mean absolute percent here. So if you can see here on this first line here, this first row, what it's doing is it's ranking, so this specific SKU here at all locations here, of these different forecasting algorithms, what is giving us that lowest forecast method. Now, what's great about this is as we start to get more actuals that come in, the system has the ability to adapt. And what I mean by that is if we start to see different spikes and things coming in when actuals start to come in and maybe it's not performing so well with this specific method here, if for some reason, let's say the naive method here has a lower percentage, what the system will do is it'll automatically switch that and say, okay, I need to start using the naive method here. So it's really cool that the system is able to kind of adapt to these forecasting changes. They're by no means locked to this one method here. But what do these mean, right? Like you see all these different statistical forecasting algorithms and how does the system know, which is which and how to kind of pick that best one. So what's really cool about this is this formula overview here. And this is what I really love to show prospective clients because for each one of these methods, what we have developed here is some overviews of each one of these different methods. What do they mean? How are they calculated? What's the typical output look like? But what I really like is this area here, is this quick facts. To really kind of bring it in and understand, okay, why would I use a linear regression over multiplicative decomposition? And so what it will show you is that, what are some of the advantages to using a linear regression? What are some of the disadvantages? And then here you have the drop down to kind of see all those different forecasting methods to give you kind of similar thing here. So what's the overview, formula, output, and quick facts? I think this is kind of reassuring to a lot of clients when, this is their first time using statistical forecasting, that they have the ability to go in and see, how do I define each one of these? All right, so next we're going to go into what's called automated outlier correction. Now, what we're looking at here is we want to start flagging where the SKU is, kind of not performing so well. We want to be able to identify outliers that come in. And so this really helps us kind of clean up the forecast and build that strong baseline forecast. So what you're looking at here is the actuals for this specific SKU. And what we're designating here are what we call an upper bound and a lower bound. And what we're using kind of is that identification method is what we call a standard deviation. And so what it's doing is it's calculating 1 sigma above and 1 sigma below, and it's flagging everywhere that the system is considering this to be an outlier. So if we go down below, what we're seeing here is for this location and this SKU, it's flagging for us where we're seeing these outliers. Now, what this allows us to do is really start to track what are some of the issues on why we're missing our forecast so bad and why this baseline isn't really capturing true actuals that are coming in. So what we built here are specific reason codes. So maybe it was a promotional demand that came in. Maybe there was, if it was below, if we missed our forecast, maybe there was a supply shortage. So, we can identify this and say supply shortage at location X here. And we can start to track these. We can do reporting off of these to understand, what are some of these reason codes and see if there's, for these specific SKUs, if there's really, a common reason why we're constantly missing this forecast. Now, what's great about this and Anaplan in general is truly the flexibility here. So let's say, for example, the demand planner that's going through this has decided that, hey, this is way too many outliers. I can't manage all these. So what we're able to do is, let's say 1 sigma maybe isn't enough. We can go in here, we can click 2. It'll refresh here. And you can see the upper bound and lower bound have moved, and it's only flagging now. This is no longer flagging as outlier because we went and changed those parameters here. So again, just kind of showing the flexibility of the tool. Let's close these. So now what I want to go through is what we call product exceptions. Now, when we think of managing by exception, this doesn't have to be just from a demand planning perspective. I think we see this pretty often in supply planning and inventory planning. What we want to do is try and really target those SKUs that we're having kind of problems with, right? Like, so for example, what we're using here is we're showing the top MAPE exception report. Now, what this is showing us is the top 20 SKUs with the highest MAPE percentage. So what this is telling us is these are the SKUs that really aren't performing very well to what the system is saying is generating for a forecast. So what this allows demand planners to do is really target these problem SKUs to focus their time and energy. Because, if a SKU is performing well, we want to let the system do the heavy lifting. We don't want the demand planners to go in and have to look at a SKU by SKU basis. We want them to manage by exception here. So we have different parameters here. You have the ability to change the number you see. Maybe you want more than 20. We can go in here and say, okay, give me the top 30. We refresh here, you can now see our list is expanded to 30 of the top SKUs here. So that's what we mean when we talk about managing by exception. So next I want to go through what we call product lifecycle management. So if we start here at the bottom, this is what we call product segmentation. Now, what product segmentation is really, really key for is to help kind of group our different SKUs into levels of importance. And so when we think of some of our customers and clients out there that have, thousands and thousands and thousands of SKUs, what this allows us to do is group these products into levels of importance to where we need to focus and say, okay, you know, for my A products that are really helping me drive the most revenue, I want to make sure I'm forecasting those products right. I want to make sure I'm keeping the right amount of inventory on those. And then vice versa, when we think of our C and D products, maybe that aren't as, you know, very responsible for driving that revenue or that margin, we want to make sure we're not keeping too much inventory on those things, those products here. So that's what product segmentation allows us to do. So what we're doing here in this specific example is grouping our products into A products, B products, and C products. Now we have different parameters that we can do this. We can do this by volume. We can do it by sales. We can do it by margin. We can do it in whatever way the customer wants. But typically what we see is really around sales. And so, you know, what's really helping us drive that revenue number? So you can see we have the ability to override kind of the percentage threshold of, okay, give me the SKUs that are responsible for the top 20% of my revenue. Okay, and the next 30, we want to show our B products, and the rest of the, you know, kind of remaining percentage here are our C products. And you can see how, you know, it's kind of distributed. You can see the product count as well. But again, this is really to help us kind of group those products to make sure that we're really focusing on what's, you know, driving those sales here. So now let's go into new product launch. So when we think of new product forecasting, one of the big issues that we see is finding a place to start when you're launching a new product. So a lot of times what we're seeing is that maybe it's replacing a similar item, or, you know, maybe it's a new product within a certain product category. What we have the ability to do within Anaplan, which is very, very helpful, is what we call assign a similar product. So what you can see here is, let's say let's focus on this SKU here. We have a new driver. We added a name here. We know what our product launch date is here. And what we've done is we've assigned it a similar product. Now, what that allows us to do is kind of twofold. Number one, we need to check the box. Is it a successor? So are we replacing an old item with this new item? You know, and then what is that cannibalization rate? So how much is this new SKU going to be, you know, negatively affecting the sales of that old SKU? Well, when we have this similar product assigned, what we have the ability to do is assign a product-specific seasonality. Now, what that allows us to do is we now understand when we launch this product, how this SKU, we assume that this SKU is going to behave very similar to the product that we've selected back here. And so what that allows us to do is, once we have a suggested annual volume, maybe it's from our sales team, or maybe that's something that we calculate in the background as well too. What we can now see is, on a week-to-week basis, when we launch this product, how is it going to behave, right? What is the unit forecast going to look like? What's the revenue forecast, COGS, gross margin, all those different things. When we think about launching a product, we now have the ability to see this. What's really cool about this as well is we can, when we assign that similar product, is there's really two approaches we can take. Is, you know, is that seasonality going to seasonality curve going to follow, you know, its current seasonality, or if we're launching it, what we typically see is there's a large ramp in the kind of the early weeks, to kind of trying to sell into our different customers. So we can look at how that SKU actually behaved when it was launched. So if we do have a launch date, we can also show that as well, which is really, really cool. So here you can see kind of the predecessor product, you know, what does our new product forecast look like as well here. So next, kind of on the flip side, compared to new product launches, you know, really this what we call end of life setup. So what we're looking at first here is Anaplan has the ability to recommend, based on certain parameters, be able to recommend to our customers products that you might want to end of life. And so what the system is doing right here is it's showing a specific time frame saying, show me product trends that are in the last 6 months that are below 15%. So really what we're seeing here is kind of a ranking system of showing, a negative rank of, these different SKUs and how they're trending. So a lot of times our customers don't know where to start when we think of end-of-lifing products. So this gives them the ability to have that visibility into what products really haven't been performing over a certain time frame. Now, a lot of times what we do this as well is we actually bring in the inventory of each one of these products. And so what that allows us to do is to give kind of extra motivations to the customer to say, okay, if I were to end of life this product, here's the amount of inventory that I know that I can get off my books. So a very similar setup here when we think of end of life is, when does the end of life start date going to take place? So let's focus on this item right here. You can see the graph is here refreshing as well. So we want to know when we plan to, when do we want to kick off the end of life here? We want to know run out duration. So, how long is the EOL process going to go for? And then here it's, 90 days. So it's showing us here, here's when we want to be completely out of product and by this end of the day. So in terms of depletion method, we have three kind of built-in reasons here. So we have a scrap, we have a forecast driven, and we have a straight line. So when we think of scrap, you can see kind of the adjustment that's going to happen on the graph here. You can see when we get to that point, it's kind of business as usual. And then we're going to completely scrap the inventory that we have down to 0. And then kind of similar, forecast driven, if we want to use a straight line over those 90 days, you can see here, we're going to see a more of a kind of less drastic drop in our inventory here. So here, what we're bringing in is kind of what does our inventory position look like in terms of our projected inventory on this EOL product, and then when we can kind of anticipate that we're be seeing 0 inventory here. So that's product lifecycle management. The last thing I want to go through is this demand collaboration in analytics. So if we open this dashboard here, so really when we think of consensus demand planning, it's really, kind of the driving factor with Anaplan, right, is we want this collaborative planning solution. I think, we talk about connected planning within finance and sales and supply chain. It's the exact same concept, but it's just really drilled down into supply chain or into specifically demand planning here is we want the ability to bring all these different plans into one location to really drive effective decision making. So what we're bringing in here from a graphical standpoint is, that baseline OTC forecast. So that statistical forecast we talked about before, our sales team forecast, marketing, if there's any customer collaboration that we're doing, any of their forecasts, financial forecast, and then kind of that agreed upon final forecast. Now, from a visual perspective, what we would be looking for as a demand planner is something very, very similar. We would just want to make sure that we're kind of, when we're looking at finances, forecasts, and sales, that we're all kind of on the same page. Now, what we're looking for is really outliers and flags here, where you can see everything kind of looks pretty normal here, but then this week here we see a huge jump. So this would tell you as a demand planner, okay, I need to reach out to this team and figure out why there's that spike in demand. Maybe there's something that I'm missing. So in terms of the different things that we can bring in here in order to kind of have this full consensus demand plan. So what we're looking at first is open customer orders. So, are there any large orders that we don't have kind of built into this forecast that we need to make sure that we're planning for? Historical data, what were we doing this time last year? That statistical baseline that we talked about. Now, what I want to focus on this piece is really what we call this forecast lift. So you know, when we're talking to our sales team and we're collaborating with marketing, you know, what are some of the lifts and dips that they know about? You know, maybe they have a lot more market intelligence around this to be able to say, okay, this is how I know the forecast is going to be changing. And we want to make sure that we're capturing those things. And then also what we're seeing a lot of is a CRM impact. So a lot of times what our clients, you know, that are using Salesforce, for example, in terms of deal management, what we have the ability to do is integrate with that solution to be able to bring in any deals that are over a certain percentage threshold of confidence that they think are going to close. So it would be agreed upon, let's say 75, anything over 75% confidence level. We want to make sure that we're bringing into Anaplan because we want to make sure that we're including that into our demand plan. Some other things that we've done for our clients as well is outside market intelligence. So, you know, maybe it's a beverage company that's really affected by weather patterns. So we want to make sure that we're bringing in weather reports and doing calculations to say, okay, how does the forecast you know, change for a specific flavor based on the weather we can anticipate. So a lot of outside factors that kind of drive their forecasts, we have the ability to make sure that we're bringing that in as well. And then once all those things are taken into account, you know, the ability to include all those risks and opportunities, any adjustments we're making, now what we have is that final consensus demand plan that we were talking about. And then we can start to dollarize from a revenue perspective. What does this look like? Now we can start seeing, okay, how does this compare to our, you know, finance, to AOP, so on and so forth. Next, we want to track our forecast performance. So, what we do here is what we call a snapshotting process. And what this allows us to do is look at how our forecast has changed over time. So typically our clients have a specific lag period, which I'll go through here in a second, of how they're grading forecast accuracy. But what they want to see is on a larger scale, longer time scale, is how is our forecast changing over time? Now, you know, like I said before, when we think of supply chain, it really all starts with that demand plan and building that strong forecast. And the reason for that is all the downstream impacts that it has. We're planning our supply. We're planning how we order products. We're planning how we, you know, plan our workforce. All these things are driven off these demand plans. So this is really why we need to make sure that we have a strong forecast or forecast process that shows how our forecast is changing over time. So what we're showing here is, you know, having that corporate goal of, you know, what does our forecast accuracy need to be? So this is, again, a very flexible that you can go in and change this corporate goal. But what we're doing is we're tracking over, you know, periods of time here, you know, how our consensus demand plan is looking compared to our actuals. And then tracking, you know, what does our forecast accuracy look like and over time? And then conditional formatting around how anywhere that we're below kind of that corporate goal. Now, the last thing I want to show you today is what we call forecast value add. Now, very similar to where we were tracking our forecast accuracy for our consensus demand plan, what we want to do is be able to track that collaboration that we talked about before around that consensus demand plan, is really understanding over time what forecasts we should be using. And so what you can see here is we're bringing in all these different plans of these different forecasts, you know, consensus demand planner forecast, what was our sales team forecasting, marketing, customer finance, so on and so forth. And we can start to track over time how each one of these groups are forecasting compared to actuals. So this is, again, just to drive that decision-making, drive collaboration and communication with your team to be able to say, okay, you know, maybe our demand planner is really the forecast that we should be using, or, you know, maybe it's marketing, maybe it's our customer forecast, so on and so forth. So it really gives us that visibility to see, you know, how the different teams are forecasting. All right. Well, again, guys, thank you so much for joining today. Please feel free to reach out with any questions that you may have, and we will talk soon. Thanks, everybody. Bye.